In chapter 10 of The Art of War, Sun Tzu talks about distinguishing between different terrains. The first one being accessible ground. So accessible ground means all parties have access to it. How you navigate, create or take small advantages in that terrain will ultimately determine victory or defeat. For example, social media is accessible ground for everybody, right? If I'm there first in raised and sunny spots, elevated and a positive light, whilst keeping in mind my line of supplies, then I would be able to fight with an advantage. The internet is accessible grounds. Books, knowledge, all of those is accessible ground. Who will be there first and who will place themselves, take advantage of the elevated and sunny spots. Next up, he talks about entangling ground. This is ground that can be abandoned, but it's difficult to reoccupy that again. Imagine you had a hardware store in Kathu. You had steep competition there, but whilst branching out to Pretoria, right, you realize that your Pretoria hardware store outperforms the one in Kathu 3-1. You now decide to double down on your Pretoria store and close shop in Kathu. After all, it's more favorable grounds in Pretoria. Obviously now the competition that you had in Kathu is taking up considerable market share and you start to notice this. Now for you to go back to Kathu and to compete again, now that is entering into entangling ground. It's not necessarily the wrong move, but for you to leave high ground, Pretoria, to go back into entangling ground, to go and compete there, is going to cost a considerable amount of resources. There's no turning back from that. You will have to destroy the opposition, not just compete. It's extremely risky and probably not going to be worth it. The skillful general would not have made such a move based on emotion, greed or ambition, but only out of necessity. Next up, temporizing ground. The word temporizing means to avoid making a decision or a commitment in order to gain time. I can see how a lot of young men nowadays are finding themselves in a temporizing situation or ground with the ladies. Let's imagine you're a competitor in a highly dynamic industry such as tech. A rival company has launched a new product or service which puts you under immense a lot of pressure to respond quickly. If you launch a hasty counter product, it could compromise quality, credibility, and lead to mishaps. Now, instead of acting immediately, you delay. You're collecting intelligence, you're positioning yourself as observing the market trend, and on top of that, you go and hint to the public and your clients that, hey, listen, something big is coming. We're busy with something. I'm teasing you guys with this, but something big is coming. You tease, but without revealing your actual strategy. In the meantime, you invest your time, energy, and resources that you've bought for yourself now so that you can refine your product or offering and ensure it's not just a reaction, but a superior alternative. By not engaging prematurely, you maintained your position as a thoughtful leader. You gained intelligence on the competitor's product. You gained insights on how the market responded to that competitor's product. And lastly, you gained an upper hand by launching a superior alternative. This concept can also apply in negotiations where you let the counterparty make the offer first, giving you the advantage of adjusting your strategy based on their position. In a nutshell, temporizing ground to me is about controlling the tempo and not being rushed into a position that benefits another party more than it would benefit you. Sun Tzu speaks about several calamities that can arise from faults on the general side. Flight, insubordination, collapse, ruin, disorganization, and rout. First up, flight. A leader who fails to inspire and motivate, who lacks vision and decisiveness, causes people to lack faith. People who lack faith are weakened and they're likely to leave or quit. We thus have a responsibility towards the people in our business and in our family to communicate clearly, to be dependable, to share a clear vision and be consistent. Number 2, insubordination. People defy orders either because of unclear communication or because of loss of respect for their leader. The moment there's lack of communication or lack of mutual respect, then it will lead to people not being aligned with or even working against the leadership goals. We have to lead with clarity and respect. Be firm, but also allow for autonomy. Number 3, collapse. Overburdening people with unrealistic expectations or a lack of resources causes them to crumble, and it leads to breakdowns in relationships. We have to ensure our people, our family, everybody in our team has the necessary resources, the tools and systems to be able to perform and to do what we expect of them to do. I see this daily. At the end of the day, it will always stay your problem and your responsibility. You are in charge of this. Number 4, ruin. Mismanagement of resources and poor planning leads to destruction, period. Neglecting financial management, environmental changes, your family's emotional needs, this leads to bankruptcy, irrelevancy, and long-term damage to your relationships. We need to plan strategically and constantly. We need to be prudent with our finances and attentive to the emotional needs of our children, your spouse. We got to form these habits or end up in destruction. We got to maintain them or end up in disaster. Number 5, disorganization. A lack of structure and discipline results in inefficiency and chaos. I've seen this so many times, even in our own businesses. No clear workflow, no accountability system. All of this causes processes and systems to start falling apart. You fix it by building a process. You fix it by building a system. You avoid it by having structured routine, communicating roles, and setting expectations. Number 6, route. A leader's inability to adapt or to foresee danger will certainly lead to defeat. Failure to adapt to market trends, changes in your family, or even a crisis leads to disconnection, conflict, and downfall. We avoid this by staying agile, assessing risks, being flexible, and staying focused on the larger goals in life. In chapter 11, the 9 situations, Sun Tzu says those who are skillful leaders know how to drive a wedge between the enemy's front and the rear. They know how to prevent cooperation between large and small divisions. This makes me think about a story between John D. Rockefeller and Tom Scott. Tom Scott threatened John D. Rockefeller's oil empire by attempting to build a pipeline to bypass Standard Oil's reliance on the railroad system. And after hearing this story, I can see how John D. Rockefeller strategically drove a wedge between the different divisions of Tom Scott's ranks and even in his company. Rockefeller attacked his revenue stream first. He stopped shipping his oil on Scott's railroad and thus cut off a large part of his revenue stream. Right off the bat, this weakens the stability in the company, right? It causes unrest and pressure from within. The second thing he did is he disrupted cooperation. Rockefeller went and he built his own oil pipeline and he bypassed the railroads completely. This move immediately drove a wedge into the divisions of Tom Scott. His railroad company and his planned oil pipeline could not cooperate effectively. Third thing he did was he undermined Scott's alliances. He cooperated and he kept strong ties with all of the other railroad companies. He ensured they did all the shipping for Standard Oil and he prevented Scott from rallying industry support from these other companies. I'm giving you a brief overview now, but in short, Scott's company eventually got crippled financially, while his pipeline plans collapsed because he didn't have any support or resources left. Rockefeller's ability to drive a wedge between his divisions, financial stability in the rear and operational plans in the front, ensured his victory and it cemented Standard Oil's dominance in the industry. As Sun Tzu said, a skillful leader disrupts cooperation between the different divisions of his or her opponent. Rockefeller's strategy in this story perfectly illustrates how one can prevent cooperation within these different divisions and ensure your own victory. You can also see the lesson of the Shawshank snake. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But basically this snake in the Shai Mountains, if you attack its middle, you'll be attacked by the head and the tail. If you attack the head, then you will be attacked by the tail. If you attack the tail, then you will be attacked by the head. Rockefeller's strategy succeeded because he saw the fractures or the cracks in his opponent's strategy or in his organization and he exploited them. But if Scott had observed his weaknesses and he adapted like the Shawshank snake, where no wedge could be driven in, right? Because if you attack the middle, both sides attack you, then he could have avoided this. By studying these tactics, not only can we learn to apply them and dominate, but we can also learn to shield ourselves from them. The wise leader is both a predator and a protector, like the unyielding Shawshank snake.